Okay, so welcome to the last of the initial introductory slideshow video talkthroughs of the history and background of classic rhetoric and why we're taking this course. Let me just give you a brief overview of a lot of the main ideas of what this class is going to cover. I know it's laid out a little bit in the syllabus, and I hope by now you've, again, looked through that. And certainly if you have any questions, you can email me or start up any discussion topics and posts in the Google Classroom, and I'll be checking that pretty regularly. And we're still trying to work out times for maybe FaceTiming or whatever, having some face-to-face Q&As as our schedules permit here. But in the meantime, let me just give you a brief overview of where we're going in this next few weeks before we really get into writing the thesis. There are still things that we want to talk about, all right? So there are 5 canons of rhetoric in the sort of classical rhetorical world here, and most of first quarter here will be in invention. Canon number 1, finding what you're going to say. This is the substance of your paper, the things that you're talking about. Then we'll move a little bit into arrangement, as you can see coming up next time. I want you to look at a brief video of arrangement and the main parts of the thesis, just to get a little preview of what we're doing later on, just so you know what's ahead of you right now. But like I said, we're going to spend a whole lot of time in the next few weeks focusing on invention, what you're saying, finding the arguments, different kinds of arguments, and what you're saying. Then we'll talk a little bit about arrangement, organizing your thoughts, putting your different ideas in the right order, and then a little bit of style here at the end of first semester here, right? Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we'll do a little bit about style practice with your writing handbooks. Hopefully you still have those, and practice different kinds of ornamentation and different kinds of the language that you'll be using to present your ideas well and in an engaging way. And a little bit about memory later on next semester, certainly as you start to write your thesis, then start to put it in your heads and practice what you're going to say, what you're going to present. I won't necessarily be able to help you too much with that over the computer, of course, but as you may recall from the last couple of years of how we've changed and I think improved the senior thesis defense, you won't necessarily have to memorize the entire paper that you're writing, that you're going to be working on, but you will need to memorize a good deal of your main ideas, a lot of different categories of what you're going to say, and we'll certainly cover that in the weeks ahead. So a little bit of memory is certainly important. When you're writing essays, obviously, and papers, certainly canons 1, 2, and 3 are where it stops. That the book that you have, hopefully by now, that we'll be reading and discussing some of those chapters, covers only 1, 2, canons 1, 2, and 3, invention, arrangement, and style, since it's about writing. But when you're doing public presentations, of course, memory, and lastly, delivery are certainly important. So those of you with a lot of speech, and debate practice and drama, you have a good deal of, experience already with delivery, and you want to sound interesting and engaging in how you present your ideas. Visual eye contact is part of that, and certainly in written discourse, there's also an element to that too, making sure your capital letters are in the right spot, your punctuation is in the right spot, your pages are in nice, neat order, and things like that. That you're not turning in assignments on used paper that has food stains on it, things like that. There's an element of delivery, even in written discourse, besides the obvious voice and gestures of public presentation and public speaking, which many of you have a lot of practice already in. So these 5 canons are certainly important. We'll go through them in order. And as we said, spend a great deal of time the next few weeks in invention, what you're going to say. All right, here's just a few key terms. You can look at this more at your leisure, this class period, and at your copy of the PDF that you don't need me to talk through and just read these definitions to you. But here are some of the key terms, the ideas that we're going to be covering and using. So we have a common language about when I say argument and proof, you know what I mean. Argument is the situation in which people disagree, as well as a kind of proof. So, when you say argument a lot, today it's mostly used as when people disagree and probably yelling and, probably resorting to name calling and unfortunate things but in the classical world, an argument wasn't necessarily so negative. It was just an understanding of an argument is the situation in which people are talking about arguing for different things, and you'll use your arguments to prove your position. And different kinds of proofs, as you can see here, the means that we've been talking about in our definition of rhetoric, finding the available means of persuasion. You're probably familiar here with definition of philosopher and things like that. So argument, proof, just so we have a common language here for these few terms. Let you read through sophistry. Has an interesting, and again, sort of sad history about how this term, like so many, were positive, then became negative, and unfortunately that's the situation in which we are in today, but you can definitely read through that on your own time, and I would encourage you to do so. And these last few kinds of arguments, just as we said, an overview of the kinds of terms that we'll be learning and using in some of the assignments in the weeks ahead. We'll talk about commonplaces pretty soon. Enthymemes and examples are part of logical proofs. Conjectures, we want to probably stay away from that as much as possible. I know in the scientific field, and creating your hypotheses, you're conjecturing about what things might be like before you investigate, things like that. So you will do your conjecturing on your own and probably just save your results and concrete evidence for your papers and things like that when you get to that point. Maximum signs are also different kinds of logical proofs that we will be discussing when we get to logical proofs in just a few weeks. Because logical proofs and others are part of what we call intrinsic proofs. There are two main categories of proofs: intrinsic proofs and extrinsic proofs. And intrinsic proofs will be first because there's three of those, and there are only basically two kinds of brief extrinsic proofs popular and available today. And so intrinsic proofs, Aristotle called them artistic, since for Aristotle rhetoric was an art form more than a science, really. But science, certainly back in his day, wasn't anything like it is today anyway. So the three kinds of intrinsic proofs that we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks. We still have some more introductory materials next week to talk about before we get to these, but like I said, I want you to know where we're going, so none of it's a big surprise when we get there. There are three kinds of intrinsic proofs. Logical proofs, appeals to reason, appeals to the use of the intellect. As you said, there are four kinds of logos: appeals to rational thinking, appeals to the intellect. Pathos, appeals to emotion, and that's not always a negative thing. Sometimes today, or a lot of times today, it's been treated more as a fallacy. Appealing to emotion, things like that, is not necessarily well received, but there are times when appealing to emotion is the right way to go about persuading people, and it's can be a proper thing to do. So we'll talk about appealing to emotion and ethos, appealing to character, the fact that you are a knowledgeable, experienced person and you have the authority, you have the intelligence, the background to make these claims. It's not always the negative, ad hominem, attacking characters. Again, those sort of fallacies are, common knowledge and popular today, but there are positive ways to appeal to character and your reputation, and we'll certainly address that, and there'll be opportunities within your senior thesis to bring up the fact that you have experience, you have done lots of research and reading and thinking through your topic, and that you are a knowledgeable source of information, not just the quoted authors and sources that you're finding, that you yourself are good examples of why this perspective is true. So appeals to the intellect with logos, appeals to emotion, pathos, appeals to character, ethos. We'll be working through those pretty soon. And then after that, as I said, extrinsic proofs, things that you go out and find. Basically, this is the research element of your senior thesis. Back in the day, it was the precedents of laws and witnesses and contracts and tortures and oaths. Back in the classical Roman and a little bit of the Greek world, the evidence of slaves was not acceptable in the legal courtroom unless it was gotten under torture. The belief that slaves would not tell the truth unless they were being physically punished and tortured to tell the truth. A very bizarre world, certainly in times in the classical world, where it's good that we've gotten away from some of that aspects of the classical world. though we're certainly trying to focus on the positive aspects of the classical world here at Summit. But today, the kinds of extrinsic proofs, the things you go out and find, testimony and data. Testimony basically would be the research, the evidence, the ideas from articles, books, interviews, what have people said and done and written about, and, journals and magazines and books and things that have been approved by the community of experts, things like that. Data, scientific evidence. You won't necessarily need to be doing a lot of experiments depending on your thesis itself, but if statistics are helpful for you, if you have a scientific or technological sort of topic, then you need the evidence of data. You'll need to go out and find that and demonstrate to your audience where this data came from and why it's reliable, things like that. So intrinsic proofs, logic, emotion, character, extrinsic proofs, basically testimony, research, quotations from other sources, and data. And so other kinds of things, facts and testimony, ideology. You can read through these definitions on your own time. Make sure you get a good definition of what a thesis is. If you don't at this point, most of you probably do by now, but just in case you don't, familiarize yourself with these terms. And so lastly, want to close here this first day. Why are we doing this? Why are we studying rhetoric beyond the basic? Well, it's a classical school. All these other seniors have done it. It seems kind of special, important, and makes the school sound like they're doing something meaningful. It's not just that sort of trite, easy answer. As we said before, we are moving the souls of human beings. This is a great opportunity to really show people that you have the skills to influence the way they think, and how you as a Christian can understand what is true about reality, who God is, what is true, and why that's important for other people to believe what you believe about a lot of issues. So, of course, we're going to learn its rules. That's the next few weeks of the basic things that I want you to learn about before we even start writing this paper. As Mr. Burgoyne would definitely emphasize, a life of active citizenship, knowing what is true, how to redeem the world, and not just vote for the right people, right candidates, but how to be a good citizen in everyday life. And certainly as Christians, we want to prepare for a life of wisdom and eloquence and conformity to Christ-likeness. And that's really what the school and various classes have been trying to inculcate within you from the beginning. And here we get a great opportunity in this class to really practice doing that, not just give a speech, write a paper, but really practice lifelong skills of demonstrating to people you really care about them, you want them to believe what is true, you believe what is true, and how can you persuade them with eloquence and humility and wisdom that what God is like and what he wants us to be like ourselves. So, like I said, a great opportunity in this class to really do important, meaningful things here in these next few weeks. And as we practice these skills in small ways, just trust me that it all will help build up to the big final tasks in the next semester, especially. By the time we get there, you'll be so skilled and so practiced at everything. It will all be super clear and super easy, and it won't be a big strain or pressure on anything. So thank you for looking at these videos and looking at these slideshows. Next time, we'll go over a bit about arrangement and kairos. If you haven't looked at those yet, depending on what day you're looking at this video, that would be the next subject to tackle, and then start working on our first assignment for Thursday night. See you next time.